Love triangles, a concept in existence for as long as love itself. But love triangles, unlike love, are controversial. They're viewed as scandalous, calculated, and deceptive. Perhaps that's because we never hear of happy, successful love triangles. We hear of ones where jealousy, competition, ego, and possessiveness take over, only to end in a tale of crime and disaster. This is the story of one such disastrous love triangle that kept India on its toes and destroyed 3 lives. This is the story of Neeraj Grover, Maria Suzairaj, and Lieutenant Emil Jerome Matthew. Hi everyone, welcome to Desi Crime, a show where we dive deep into some of the craziest cases from around South Asia. I'm your host Ashwarya,
And I'm Aryan.
and the case that I have for you today is one that will make you happy you're single.
I mean, glad to know there is something
There
that
is a
can
reason,
make
yes.
being single a source of happiness.
Why are single people so unhappy?
No, I'm happy.
Why are they always complaining?
I'm happy. No, I know I like being single, and if the right person comes, I will
Yeah.
choose to not be single.
Good, be happy about it, you guys. Be proud about it.
But with this story,
Mm-hmm.
there is not a single person or a couple. In fact, there is a trifecta.
Yes.
Which usually, too many cooks spoil the relationship,
Yep,
as the old
yep,
adage.
yep.
Very famous one.
Right.
So tell us about this love triangle that had the nation by its toes.
So, this episode begins on the 6th of May 2008, the day a very big name in India's television industry just vanished. 25-year-old Neeraj Grover. Now, Neeraj Grover wasn't a big name in the same way that actors and actresses are. Grover was the creative head of a huge Mumbai-based production house called AdLab Synergy and was famous for his work on huge projects as a famous television executive. If any of you ever watched Kya Panchvi Paas Se Tez Hain, hosted by Shah Rukh Khan, Neeraj Grover was the executive producer of the show. He was actually, like Aryan, a native of Kanpur in Uttar Pradesh and had moved to Noida to receive a degree from Amity University and then moved to Mumbai to make it big in the creative space like hundreds of thousands of Indians. But now, on the 6th of May, he was missing. On this day, Grover was in his apartment at a complex called Seven Bungalows, which he shared with 2 friends and a cousin, having dinner at around 9:30 p.m. when he got a call. On the other end of the call was a woman named Maria Monica Suzairaj, Neeraj's friend. Maria was calling because she had just shifted to the Dheeraj Solitaire building in Malad and she needed Neeraj's help in setting up her new apartment. Not tonight, I have an early morning meeting. I'll stay at home, Neeraj said before cutting the call and continuing dinner. At 9:55 p.m., his phone rang again. It was Maria again, asking him to come over again. Babe, really, let it be. I've just started my dinner, said Neeraj before a long pause. He then cut the call, looked at his friends and said, She's calling me, I have to go. At least finish your food, his friends clapped back. Paji, he snapped his fingers, his goofy grin betraying his lie. Main bas abhi gaya aur abhi aaya. I'll be back before you know it. Now, Maria wasn't just some casual friend of Neeraj. The two had actually become really close. They had met when Maria had come to Mumbai, leaving behind her family in Karnataka, trying to make a mark as an actress. Neeraj had offered Maria an audition, but Maria's command over Hindi needed some more work. So even though Neeraj couldn't offer her a role, the two started a friendship. Part of this friendship dynamic still involved Neeraj finding Maria a job with his former employer, Balaji Telefilms, founded by Ekta Kapoor and the production house behind films like The Dirty Picture and Once Upon a Time in Mumbai.
Ishwara, when you say that their arrangement was that of a friendship, it sounds like it's almost contractual. Like they're obliged to be
Right.
friends. So were they friends, or was there a little more in that equation than just friendship?
I think at the beginning there was just friendship, maybe with a hint of like sexual chemistry and
Yeah.
attraction thrown in, which does tend to make things a little bit awkward
Mm-hmm.
and weird. But I think it started off purely as a friendship and then developed somewhere along the way. But we'll
Got
get to all of
got,
that.
got.
In fact, when Maria couldn't find herself an apartment to stay, she had even stayed with Neeraj in his apartment for a while. Neeraj sounds like a sweet man just helping a woman out, and maybe he was. But he was also known to be kind of a player. He was a young man living in a beautiful city in a career that would probably have him surrounded by beautiful women all the time, and Neeraj wasn't complaining. His friend Deepak Kumar came forward to say, quote, Neeraj could easily switch from one woman to another without wasting his emotions. Kumar remembers saying to Neeraj once, मेरे हिस्से की लड़कियां भी तुम्हारे हिस्से में ही रहती हैं. Your lot includes my share of women too. In fact, his former employer Ekta Kapoor said he was seemingly sweet, but the boy liked to play dangerous games. During his 5-month stay at Balaji, Neeraj was involved in successive relationships with 3 of his colleagues. He wriggled out of one of them by telling the woman that being with her was making him forget a former girlfriend who died, which in turn made him feel unfaithful. Later, we found out he had a dog who died, but never a girlfriend. He was seemingly sweet, but the boy liked to play dangerous games. He often hit on women he knew to be already involved. It was some kind of a sexual power trip for him, and many guys hated him for that. End quote. Alright, Aryan, I need a man's perspective here. What is your opinion on a guy and a girl being friends? The world is divided on this question. Do you think one person always ends up developing feelings? Do you think men can never be platonic towards women they find attractive? Like, what's the whole deal?
I truly believe guys who have this very fervent belief that men and women cannot be just friends are simply projecting
Okay.
and how they feel that they are susceptible for catching feelings or some kind of a sexual tension if they're around women. But I think the need of the hour for men of this world are more female friends. So I
Agreed.
think you need to be surrounded by femininity as a man to get the female perspective. I mean, you would know this. Whenever I have girl issues,
Oh, yeah.
you're the first person I reach out to
Yeah.
because my guy friends won't be able to help me out with complex emotional issues.
Yeah.
I mean, the most we can do is talk about cricket, IPL trades. So that's about has complicated our emotional intelligence gets. So
That makes sense.
yeah, for sure, I think men and women can be friends, really good friends.
Now, regardless of my thoughts on Maria and Neeraj being able to be friends or Aryan's thoughts on the same, Maria already had a boyfriend. And this boyfriend had his own thoughts on Neeraj and his equation with Maria. This boyfriend was naval officer Lieutenant Emile Jerome Matthew. Matthew belonged to Mysore and was a man with a commanding presence and a very bright future serving his country in the Navy. In the book Death in Mumbai, author Meenal Bhaghel writes, he was a triathlete, achieved good grades with practiced ease, did cross-country running, water skiing and sailing, but saved his best efforts for swimming. He would swim up to 10 kilometers without a break, often practicing in endurance swimming competitions organized at the NDA at Khadakwasla and winning the Blazer. If there was one word to capture Emile's personality, I'd say he was a stud. End quote. He had completed the Naval Engineers course in 2000 and was sent to Goa for a 6-month orientation. Because of his job, he and Maria spent a significant amount of their time apart from each other, but to the world outside, it seemed like they managed just fine because of how crazily they loved each other. Matthew came from a well-off family, he was good-looking, he was intelligent and capable, and then he had also found himself the seemingly perfect girlfriend in Maria. The two went to the same high school where Maria was Matthew's senior, and the two had started dating back then itself. The two were actually engaged, with some reports even suggesting that they were about to get married within the next few months. But Maria's equation with Neeraj was problematic to Matthew. Perhaps added to all of this was the fact that Matthew never saw Neeraj and Maria be friends. He only ever heard of this man named Neeraj that was helping his girlfriend move and offering her his place to stay in and trying to help her make it big in films and television. This was because Matthew was posted in Kochi at the time that Maria and Neeraj developed this friendship. Maria had also told Matthew that she thought that Neeraj had a crush on her, but obviously she didn't reciprocate those feelings. Even Neeraj's own friends have claimed that they could see how much Neeraj liked Maria. All this information unsettled Matthew and maybe even made him jealous. Very, very jealous. Maybe more jealous than it should have made any normal person. Because Matthew was known for having problems with his temper. In fact, Matthew's childhood friend Vinay Kumar said in an interview, "A whole group of boys from our school once convinced me to shut Matthew's eyes as he returned from a water break. But such was his fury as I held him that I could feel his body shivering with the force of his anger." End quote. As Matthew continued to manage his work, long-distance relationship, and his new brewed jealousy against Maria and Neeraj, on May 6th, after receiving that call from Maria and going over to her apartment at around 10 p.m. that night, Neeraj just disappeared. The watchman outside of Maria's building, a man named Kundan Jha, had watched Neeraj go into the building, but he didn't see him come out. All Kundan Jha saw was a different man at the gate the next morning at 7:30 a.m. wanting to go meet Maria. Kundan asked this man to make an entry in the book. You know those name, date and time of entry registers? But this man refused. "I'm her cousin," he kept repeating. "Par naam kya hai? What's your name?" the watchman asked. The man didn't budge, eventually wearing the watchman down and entering the building without making an entry. This was obviously fishy to Kundan, but just a few hours later at 12:30 p.m., he saw Maria exit the building and she looked fine. So Kundan assumed all was well. What Kundan didn't notice were the bite marks all over Maria's arms and chest and slash marks on her wrists. They were the first sign of what had gone down in Maria's apartment between 10 p.m. the night before and 12:30 p.m. when she left her house. By this point, Neeraj was missing. His friends and cousins that shared a house with him tried to call him, but nobody answered. His parents in Kanpur were a little worried too. Not terribly worried just yet. Maybe their son had a late night and slept until late. Surely he'll pick up soon, they must have thought. It wasn't like Neeraj should not talk to his parents, especially his mom. The two spoke twice a day, every day, once at 10 a.m. and then at 11 p.m. Today, Neeraj had missed his 10 a.m. call. No matter how many times his mom, Neelam Grover, called him, nobody answered the phone. Neelam called her daughter, Neeraj's sister, and told her that Neeraj wasn't taking her calls. Neeraj's sister immediately called her cousin, the one that lived with Neeraj in the same apartment, and the cousin told her that Neeraj hadn't come home all night. There were no signs of him anywhere. Neeraj's parents called him a total of 130 times that day, and 129 of those went unanswered. I say 129 out of 130 because a call made by Neeraj's parents between 4 and 5 p.m. the day after he disappeared was picked up. His mom felt a second of relief. "Ginny? Hello, Ginny, can you hear me? Ginny, hello?" She screamed out to the phone, but nobody answered. Ginny is what she called Neeraj affectionately, but from the other side of the phone, she didn't hear her son's voice. She just heard random muffles and people talking in the distance. "Ginny!" she screamed one last time, but nothing again. And then the call got cut. Was Neeraj alive but in trouble? Had he just picked up, or did someone find his phone somewhere? Nobody knew. Finally, when 24 hours had passed after Neeraj had left his house and vanished, his family and friends filed a missing persons report with the Mumbai police. A day after that, Neeraj's parents landed in Mumbai, the city their son had asked them to move to once he made it big in the film industry. But now their son was missing, and the couple made their way from the airport to the police station to meet with the inspector in charge. Whoever this police inspector was, the family wasn't satisfied with the speed of the investigation. And so someone asked Neeraj's father to instead ask Mumbai Police's brightest inspector for help. Inspector Rakesh Maurya, head of the Mumbai Crime Branch. Now, I hope you all remember Inspector Rakesh Maurya because he's been featured on this podcast multiple times. He was in charge of the Sheena Bora and Rani Mukherjee case. He was in charge of the Rehman Todi love story case, the Nithari case, and so many more. At the Malad police station, Neeraj's parents met Inspector Rakesh Maurya and Neeraj's friends and flatmates, all of whom were meeting with the police to recount their version of when they last saw Neeraj. It was at this meeting in the police station that Neeraj's parents realized that the last time their son had been seen was at the house of a girl named Maria Suzairaj. She lives close by. She had called Neeraj at night to help with her shift, said one of Neeraj's friends. Let's go to her house then. I'd like to meet and talk to her, said Neeraj's father. When Neeraj's parents and friends arrived at Maria's apartment, what jumped out at them as most of was how empty the apartment looked. It was completely empty. No furniture, no boxes, nothing. Neeraj's father admits to wondering how strange this was at the moment. She had asked Neeraj to come over to help her move her stuff after all. Where was the stuff? Something else that stood out as weird to Neeraj's family was a freshly painted wall in the house with the paint still wet. Painting jobs inside houses are usually to be finished before tenants move in. It had been a few days since Maria moved in. Why was the paint still wet? Weird, he thought. As Neeraj's parents asked Maria what her last interaction with Neeraj was and what she knew about his whereabouts, she started crying hysterically. As everyone tried to console her, suddenly a man came out from one of the rooms in the house. This is Emil, my fiancé, Maria said between her sobs.
I mean, I'm prodding the obvious question here, so this is don't judge me for it, but I gotta state the obvious, which is how the hell did Emil land up from Kochi to Mumbai overnight or in the morning? And was he the cousin, so to say, that showed up at night?
Yeah, so you're headed in the right direction. Your usual spidey senses are correct.
Yeah, didn't take a lot. Yeah.
No, but we'll get to all of that really soon. Now, by the 13th of May, the investigation had been transferred to Inspector Rakesh Maurya when a group of Neeraj's friends, including Maria Suzairaj, came to visit the inspector to demand a quicker investigation. As Inspector Rakesh Maurya sat face to face with Maria, he said something about her eyes bothered him. What's your name? He asked her. Maria Suzairaj. I'm also a friend of Neeraj's, she responded. I know he disappeared from your house. You, lady, are my number one suspect. And with that sentence, Inspector Maurya began his deep dive into the story of Maria Suzairaj and her connection to Neeraj's disappearance. While Neeraj's father was distributing missing persons posters, visiting mortuaries and hospitals, and calling the Osho ashram in Pune to ask if his son was there, Inspector Maurya and his team were interrogating Maria for 10 hours on her 28th birthday. During the investigation, Maria tells the police the same story, that Neeraj had come to her house at around 10:30 p.m. on the night of May 6 to help her move her stuff in. At her place, he ordered food from the Sai Sagar Hotel, a detail corroborated by Maria's apartment guard Kundhan Jha because the delivery driver had signed at the gate. After having food and talking to his mother, however, Neeraj got a lot of calls on his phone from his friends asking him to come over, one of them even saying, "Aa jao, naya maal aaya hai," or "Come over, fresh stuff is here," basically alluding to drugs. And so at 1:30 a.m., Neeraj left Maria's apartment but forgot his phone in Maria's apartment. When the police interrogated Emil, he said he came over to Maria's apartment at 7:30 a.m. the next morning straight from the airport. When he arrived there, Neeraj wasn't in the apartment. Maria was alone in the flat and he's never seen Neeraj Grover. The police asked Emil what he was doing in Mumbai and he said he had arrived for naval training, a claim that the police did not corroborate at the time. So from this initial interrogation of Maria, it seemed weird to the police that a man like Neeraj, described by many as deeply sociable and a stud, forgot his phone at Maria's place but didn't even try once to get it back. If he was actually going to a different friend's place, he could have used any of their phones to call his phone back or call Maria to ask to pick up his phone sometime. But he did not. Weird, thought the cops. The police also noticed the bite marks all over Maria's arms and chest and the slash marks on her wrists, the same marks that first appeared the morning that Emil came over to Maria's apartment. The police ask her how she got the marks and she says that she and Emil, quote, got romantic since he had come over after being away from her for a while, which led to the bite marks. She said a cooking accident led to the slash marks on her wrists, but the cops found this weird too. They claim to have thought that they're all married, all in love with their wives, yet something about the marks on Maria was weird. Because the police had no evidence against Maria, though, they let her go, but kept calling her to the police station over and over again for about 10 days. Rakesh Maria turned this interrogation into something unique, just like all of his other past interrogations. During the 1993 Blast interrogation, Rakesh Maria was known to offer suspects kilos of jalebis and then refusing to offer them any water afterwards. It was his own unique form of psychological torture. With Maria, the inspector discussed her likes, dislikes, and favorite books. He let her move around the room and pick up phone calls just so he could study her body language. She exuded overconfidence, the inspector said later on. From their investigation of Neeraj's friends, they realized that Maria was most likely cheating on Emil with Neeraj. A few friends claimed to know that the two had slept together, while many others had noticed their public display of affection in restaurants. The police knew they were on the right track, they just had to keep trying harder. A different inspector in the case, Inspector Rao Rane, employed his favorite tactic on Maria. He called her into the police station day after day after day and asked her what she thought happened to Neeraj. He would ask her to lay out every possible scenario of what could have happened to him. Initially, she kept saying she didn't know, as expected. But slowly, as her frustrations built up, Inspector Rao Rane expected her to trip up in her details and reveal something. Finally, after days of using these tactics on Maria finally revealed something. A seemingly innocent detail that would wrap this case up in a neat bow. She told the police that Neeraj had left his phone with her, a detail we already knew, and she told him that she and Emil had taken a taxi on the 7th, the day that Emil had come over, to Dadar between 4 and 5 to go shopping. At the face of it, nothing is wrong with these statements, until the police digs further. Now, for cell phone records, remember the Adnan Saeed case. At least in the 2000s, the phones only pinged a tower when you either made a call that was answered or answered a call yourself or received a text. The moment they pull up the cell phone records of Neeraj's phone, they realize that of the 130 calls that the Grovers had made to their son the day that he disappeared, one was answered at around 4:30 p.m. and the location for that one was in Andheri, not Dadar, which is where Maria claims she was. Why was Neeraj's phone in Andheri but Maria in Dadar when Neeraj's phone was supposed to be with Maria? Why did she not pick up any of the 130 calls that came to Neeraj's phone that day? Why didn't she say anything in the one call that she did pick up? The police continued to look over Neeraj's phone records and realized that his phone's last known location was in Dahisar. The phone was pinged in Dahisar because of a text that Neeraj had received from a freelance artist. What was in Dahisar? How did Neeraj's phone reach there, they wondered. From Maria's cell phone records, the police also realized that between May 7th, the day that Neeraj disappeared, and May 20th, Emil and Maria had talked on call almost 1,000 times. That amounts to 76 calls a day. A bunch of this was hugely suspicious to the police. And so they decided that Inspector Rao Rane would be casually chatting with Maria when another inspector will come in and pretend as if he had just discovered that Neeraj's phone was located in Andheri, a completely different direction than Dadar, which is where Maria said she was. When the police enacted their plan, Maria revealed that she was actually in Andheri before going to Dadar because she and Emil had gone to a friend's house, a friend named Kiran Shreyan, to borrow his car so they could go shopping.
It appears that she has kind of Jimmy jacked herself because in one of the previous retellings of what occurred on that day to the police, she noted that Emil and her took a taxi to go shopping, not their own car or not a friend's car at least, which is very different from a taxi.
Precisely. First, she said they took a taxi. Now, she says they stopped by at a friend's place in Andheri to get his car and then took that car to go shopping. Then the next day, she says she misremembered which friend it was that they took the car from. She said it wasn't her friend Kiran Shreyan as she had initially thought. It was actually Emil's Navy coastmate Jitesh Saini's car. When Maria's building watchman was interrogated, he claimed to have seen this new car that didn't belong to Maria. It was a blue-grey Santro. Not only did he see Maria and Emil driving this car, he also saw them stuffing the trunk of the car with huge plastic bags that were so heavy that they both struggled to put them inside. But when the police called Emil's Navy coastmate Jitesh Saini to ask if he indeed had given his car to the couple, Jitesh Saini said no, he did not give his car to them. Police knew this weird car detail slip-up was their shot at making Maria talk, and so they clung on to it. So Maria, tell me, did you really go shopping with Emil in a taxi to Dadar? Asked Inspector Rao Rane. She tells the police she did take a taxi, but only to her friend's house, and she was deeply confused about which friend she took it from, and it was actually her friend Kiran. So the police call Kiran in for questioning. According to the book Death in Mumbai, this is how Kiran describes this interrogation. That evening, 8 policemen asked me the same set of questions again and again. Your name, father's name, what do you do? And I kept saying, Sir, is there anything I should be worried about? Please tell me what has happened. And they would turn around and say, why don't you tell us what has happened? She is, after all, your friend. Finally, at 1:30 or 1:40 am, they said, you can go home but leave your car behind. Behave with Maria as if you haven't spoken to us at all. But I was so hassled that the minute I got home, I called her and told her the crime branch guys had called me. What have you done, Maria? I asked her. Did you do anything in my car? Until this point, I had no idea what had happened or even who Neeraj was. She kept saying nothing but sounded very stressed and panicky. And she also told me that she was very scared. End quote. The police were now sick of the cat and mouse games. They knew Maria knew something and they needed her to speak. And so, the day after Kiran was questioned, at 2:30 am, 6 crime branch officers arrived at Maria's flat. I looked at her and said, come on Maria, we have to go, said Inspector Rao Rane. She hugged her mother before leaving her house and got into the police jeep, where she immediately started crying and broke down. Neeraj is no more. Emil killed him and burnt his body, she said from under her tears. Inside the police station, Maria tells the tale of jealousy, anger, and a love triangle gone horribly wrong. She tells the tale of 3 clashing personalities that mixed to lead to murder. She tells the police Emil was a man easily angered and jealous. The fact that she was an actress, had more male than female friends, and that she kept mentioning Neeraj in their conversation angered him. On the 6th of May, when Neeraj was over at Maria's house, Maria received a call from Emil, who was still in Kochi. On this call, Emil heard Neeraj's voice in the background at 11 pm and asked Maria what he was doing there so late in the night. Maria said he was just there helping her settle in. As they were talking, Maria's phone battery almost died and she asked Emil to call on Neeraj's phone instead. When Emil called on Neeraj's phone and Maria picked up, Neeraj screamed in the background. He wants to know what I'm doing here. What kind of a fiancé is he when his girlfriend needs another man to be with her? These words were enough to enrage Emil. Back in Kochi, Emil's roommate, Lieutenant Vasant Kumar, came back from a party at 11:30 pm to find Emil agitated in the room after talking to Maria. He demanded the keys to my motorcycle, saying that he had to leave for the airport and that he would bring the bike back upon his return. End quote. Officers on their bases weren't allowed to leave whenever they wished to. They weren't allowed to miss their daily orders of business, and if Emil left, he wouldn't have made it back in time. And so Lieutenant Vasant Kumar reminded him of that. He asked him not to leave, but Emil was irreconcilable. It's a matter of life and death. My ticket has been bought, Emil said. I could see Emil was shaking even as he spoke to me, asking for the keys. Convinced that Emil would have an accident if he drove in this agitated state, I offered to drop him to the airport for his flight. But what is interesting about this ticket that Emil booked to Mumbai is that it was booked half an hour before Maria even called Neeraj over to her apartment. And that day, May 6th, Emil and Maria had talked more than 25 times. The couple had other issues that had prompted Emil to travel to Mumbai like this, risking severe consequences from his seniors in the Navy. Emil left without informing anyone on the base and landed in Mumbai the next morning. Upon arriving at Maria's apartment, he refused to tell the watchman who he was. Why? The prosecution in this case struggles to answer why Emil didn't tell the watchman who he was. Maybe Emil knew what was going to happen up in Maria's apartment and he wanted to conceal his identity the best he could. Getting past security, Emil walked up to Maria's apartment and rang the bell. There was no response. He knocked and rang the bell again. Yet again, no response. He persisted and knocked harder and rang the bell quicker, and a groggy, sleepy Maria arrived at the door wondering who was so eager to meet her so early in the morning. When Maria opened the door to see who was knocking, her heart dropped. She couldn't believe Emil was right in front of her. When she opened the door, before she could even ask what he was doing there, he pushed her aside and walked into the house straight to her bedroom. Inside the bedroom, he found a pretty much naked Neeraj who was asleep. But from all of the commotion, Neeraj woke up, saying, "Oh, so is this the fiancé?" Soon there ensued a fight between the two men, somewhere in the middle of which Emil grabbed a knife from Maria's kitchen and stabbed Neeraj in the abdomen. Maria later claimed that Emil stabbed him with such force that his intestines protruded from his body. The room filled up with blood and splatters were all over Emil and Maria's clothes too. In his fit of rage, before doing anything about the body, Emil allegedly raped Maria right next to Neeraj's dead body. Once he was done, she went into the washroom to clean the bloodstains off of herself, but Emil entered the washroom too, proceeding to allegedly rape her again. This is what she will later say led to the bite marks all over her body that the police noticed. For hours after that, the couple washed their house together, cleaned the curtains, the bed sheets, and the mattresses. He then asked Maria to go buy new curtains, room freshener, a better knife, big plastic bags, and a duffel bag. He also told Maria to call one of Neeraj's friends and tell them that Neeraj had forgotten his phone at her place. This is how the story of him forgetting his phone began. Maria came home with everything that Emil had asked for, and slowly, Emil began chopping Neeraj's body up in pieces. Now, a lot of sources, even reputable sources online, will say that they chopped his body up into 300 pieces. There is very little evidence for where this number 300 came from, but as mentioned by the judge later in the trial, the number is far from accurate. Inspector Rakesh Maria had only ever said that Neeraj's body was cut into several pieces. Now, as Emil was cutting up the body into pieces, the two realized they had no way of transporting the body to a final dumping location. Maria had just moved to Mumbai and didn't have her car, and Emil wasn't from Mumbai at all. And so, Emil asked Maria to think of a friend whose car they could borrow. This is where Maria remembered Kiran Shreyan and decided to call him. Shreyan admitted to never liking Maria too much, but when Maria called pleading for a car that day, Shreyan agreed, while asking her to give it back before 9 p.m. So at around 4 p.m. of the day that Neeraj was killed, the two sat in a taxi and drove to Andheri to pick up the car from Kiran's place. When Maria went to Kiran's door to get the keys, Kiran noticed the marks all over her chest and arms, but said nothing. He simply gave her the key. Sometime now, Neeraj's parents will call Neeraj's phone, which for some reason Maria had in the pocket of her jeans. While trying to get the phone out of her pocket, she will by mistake accept the call, leading to the one picked up call out of the 130, the call which helped place Neeraj's phone in Andheri and crack this case. Maria immediately realized her mistake and cut the call without saying a word. The two then drove Kiran's blue-grey Santro to Maria's apartment, where the building watchman would go on to see it. Here, the couple will bring down plastic bags with parts of Neeraj's body that they will then put in the trunk and back seat. Forensic analysis of the car will reveal splotches of blood in multiple locations. Now, the couple did take the car from Kiran, but they were scared that Kiran wouldn't stand up for them if questioned by the police. And that is why Emil asked Maria to tell the cops that the car they got was actually not Kiran's, but Emil's course mate's. This course mate, Jitesh Saini, had initially agreed to lie for the couple and tell people that the couple had taken his car. But when Jitesh realized that the Mumbai crime branch was involved, Jitesh got scared. Firstly, he told the couple that there were no calls between them from that day that they took the car to show that they took his car, so they would get caught by the police. Secondly, he said Maria's watchman saw a blue-grey Santro and he didn't have a Santro at all. And with that, Jitesh refused to lie to the police for the couple, forcing them to change their story a third time in front of the police. Finally, the couple took the body parts to Dadar, dumped them in a jungle next to the village of Manor, doused them in gasoline and lit them all on fire. From this location, the police would find Neeraj's clothes, a chain, a locket, his skull, his ribcage and more. Once the police had Maria's statement in place, they then worked on bringing in Emil, who was harder to arrest by virtue of his job as a naval officer, but finally, the police succeeded. When Emil was brought in, he kept asking to meet Maria, quote, just once. He didn't think she would ever rat him out, but she had. And he found that out the day the charge sheets were filed. The love between the two soon dissipated and their versions of the story shifted. Emil says he never raped Maria. Maria says he did. Emil says he cut up the body on Maria's command. Maria says she went shopping for supplies on Emil's command. They both forgot the romance and began to ardently self-preserve. 3 years after the murder of Neeraj Grover, Emil and Maria were convicted by the court. But to the whole country's disappointment, Maria was only charged with destruction of evidence and given 3 years in prison, found not guilty for murder. Since the trial had lasted a little over 3 years, Maria was free to walk out of prison pretty much the day after the trial. The minute she walked out, she and her lawyers held a press conference. This press conference did not feature an apology or remorse. In this press conference, Maria's lawyers will hold up a picture of Neeraj's burnt bones and remains, saying, "Where are the 300 pieces? I can only see 5 or 6. Emil Jerome was convicted of culpable homicide not amounting to murder and sentenced to just 10 years in prison for his crime being one of passion, not one of premeditation. For those of you interested in a little extra appalling piece of information, Maria Suzairaj was arrested again a few years ago, this time for defrauding people out of crores and crores of rupees. While certainly a lighter crime than cold-blooded murder, reform seems far away for her. Neeraj has been gone for 16 years now. His death marked the end of not just the Grover family that wished to move to Mumbai, watch their son succeed, and rejoice in his happiness. His death also marked the end of the once proud Matthew family and the once peaceful Suzairaj family. Generations that will carry these names have been tainted with a gruesome crime committed for frivolous reasons. For what? Like always, for love. If you like what we do here at Desi Studios and absolutely love what we're wearing today, this is merch you can go buy all for yourself.
You can buy this Desi Crime merch in our YouTube store on the link down below at Kadak Merch. Keep the engines at Desi Studios rolling so we can pay our videographer right behind the camera to make these amazing episodes just for you.